Get out. The words hit Marcus Reed like shrapnel, sharp, sudden, designed to wound. He just pushed through the brass-handled door of Belmont Bistro, the restaurant where his father used to bring him for birthday dinners. When the maitre d' stepped into his path, arms crossed, eyes cold, a human wall blocking the entrance. This restaurant doesn't serve your kind anymore. Marcus stood there, one hand still on the door, his military jacket suddenly feeling heavier than the 60-pound ruck he'd carried through Kandahar. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows caught the maitre d's slick-back hair, his thin frame practically vibrating with smug authority. "Excuse me?" Marcus's voice came out steady, but his jaw tightened. The same jaw that had once been wired shut after an IED blast. "You heard me." The man's gaze traveled deliberately from a faded 101st Airborne patch on Marcus's shoulder down to his worn combat boots. "We have standards now. Maybe try the diner across town." He paused, letting the insult land. "More your speed. Imagine serving your country for 15 years, surviving 2 tours in Afghanistan, taking shrapnel that nearly killed you while saving a translator's life, earning a Purple Heart that sits heavy in your pocket like a piece of your soul, only to return home and be told you don't belong in a restaurant you've been visiting since you were 8 years old." That's what happened to Marcus Reed, a black veteran who'd given everything for his country. But what the racist staff at Belmont Bistro didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just any veteran. He was a silent partner in one of Hollywood's biggest production companies, a self-made millionaire who'd invested his military savings into tech startups that exploded, and the man whose production company was currently filming an anti-discrimination documentary. And today, they were about to learn exactly who they'd chosen to humiliate on camera. Marcus had been looking forward to this lunch all week. After months of negotiations, his production company had finally secured the rights to adapt a best-selling novel into a major film. He'd chosen Belmont Bistro specifically because of the memories. His father used to bring him here on special occasions, back when the original owner, Mr. Belmont, would greet every customer like family, would ruffle Marcus's hair and sneak him extra dessert. But Mr. Belmont had passed away 2 years ago, and his son, Richard Belmont Jr., had taken over. The changes were immediate and ugly, though Marcus hadn't experienced them firsthand until today. "I've been eating here for 20 years, Marcus said, his voice dropping into that calm, controlled tone he'd learned commanding troops under fire. He pulled out his phone. "I have a reservation under Reed, 12:30. The maitre d', whose name tag read Gerald, didn't even glance at the reservation book sitting open on the podium beside him. "Reed?" His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Don't see it. Must have been a mistake on our end." Behind Gerald, Marcus could see half-empty tables scattered throughout the dining room. Even as Gerald spoke, a white couple in their 30s, the man wearing cargo shorts and a faded T-shirt, was being seated at a prime window spot. The hostess practically bowed as she handed the menus, her smile genuine and warm. The contrast couldn't have been more obvious if Gerald had painted it in neon. "That's interesting," Marcus replied, his tone still even, "because I got a confirmation email this morning." He held up his phone, showing the reservation confirmation. "And those tables look pretty available to me." Gerald's eyes flicked the phone, then away, as if the evidence didn't matter. His hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie, a tell Marcus had learned to read in interrogation rooms overseas. But he pushed forward anyway. "Look, sir," he emphasized the word with dripping sarcasm, "we've recently updated our policies. Belmont Bistro has transitioned to a more exclusive model." Before Marcus could respond, heels clicked against the hardwood floor. A woman appeared beside Gerald, early 40s, wearing an expensive pantsuit and the kind of calculated smile that belonged in a corporate boardroom, not a restaurant. Her manicured nails tapped against the reservation book like a judge's gavel. "Is there a problem here?" Her name tag identified her as Carol Winters, assistant manager. "This gentleman," Gerald gestured at Marcus as if he were pointing out a stain on the carpet, "seems confused about our reservation policy." Carol's gaze swept over Marcus with surgical precision, lingering on his jacket, his jeans, his boots. Each look felt like an assessment, a judgment, a dismissal. "Sir, Belmont Bistro has recently implemented updated dress code and membership requirements." She gestured vaguely at his clothing, her voice maintaining that surgically polite tone that made everything sound reasonable even when it wasn't. Unfortunately, your current attire doesn't meet our standards. We've transitioned to a more curated dining experience. Marcus looked down at his outfit. Clean dark jeans, a pressed button-down shirt, and his military service jacket with the unit patch still visible on the shoulder, the same jacket he'd worn to this restaurant 3 months ago without any issues. He'd watched that same white guy in cargo shorts and a t-shirt walk past him 30 seconds ago. "This is my military service jacket," Marcus said quietly, his patience beginning to fray at the edges. "I'm a veteran. 15 years. 2 combat tours." Carol's expression didn't change. If anything, her smile became more fixed, more plastic. "That's admirable. Truly. Thank you for your service. But our policies apply to everyone equally. Perhaps you could return when you're more appropriately dressed for our establishment's atmosphere?" The words were polite. The message wasn't, and both of them knew it. The Purple Heart in Marcus's pocket, earned from shrapnel that had torn through his left leg in a Kandahar marketplace, fragments that still set off metal detectors, pain that still woke him on cold mornings, suddenly felt like it was burning through the fabric. He'd taken that shrapnel while throwing himself over a local translator named Hamid, a father of 3 who'd risked his life helping American forces. Marcus had spent 6 months in physical therapy learning to walk without a limp, and now this woman was telling him his sacrifice didn't earn him the right to eat lunch in a restaurant where he'd celebrated his 8th birthday. "Let me speak to the owner," Marcus said, his voice dropping lower. "Richard Belmont." Gerald and Carol exchanged a glance. Quick, conspiratorial, confident. "Mr. Belmont is extremely busy with administrative duties." Carol said smoothly, "But I can assure you he'd support our policies completely. They're designed to maintain the standards his father built." Her words said standards, but her tone said, "People like you don't belong here." "Then get him anyway," Marcus replied, his voice carrying that absolute authority that made both staff members shift their weight uncomfortably. "Because I promise you, this conversation is about to get very interesting, and he'll want to be here for it." Carol's smile finally cracked around the edges. "Sir, if you continue to be disruptive, we'll be forced to contact the authorities. This is private property, and we have the right to refuse service." The authorities, the police, for trying to eat lunch, for existing while black in space they decided he didn't belong in. "Go ahead," Marcus said, pulling his phone back out and opening the video camera. "But while you're doing that, I'll be making a few calls of my own and recording this entire conversation." He held the phone up, framing both of their faces. "Because this is what discrimination looks like." "You can't film us," Gerald sputtered, his confidence finally wavering. "This is private property." "Actually," Marcus replied, his voice taking on the patient tone of someone explaining something simple to someone slow, "this is a public accommodation under the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Title II specifically. And I can absolutely document discrimination." He kept the camera steady. "So please continue. Tell me again how I don't fit your image." "This isn't discrimination," Carol insisted, but her voice had lost its smooth control. "This is about maintaining appropriate standards for our dining experience. We have the right to enforce our policies consistently." "Consistently?" Marcus's eyebrow raised. He gestured with his free hand toward the dining room. That gentleman in cargo shorts and a Pink Floyd t-shirt sitting by the window right now. What policy is he meeting that I'm not? Carol's jaw tightened. "That's different." "How?" Marcus pressed. "Explain to me exactly how it's different." The silence stretched. Neither Carol nor Gerald could answer without saying what they both meant, what they'd been dancing around, what hung in the air between them like smoke. Have you ever been made to feel like you don't belong somewhere you've been welcome your entire life? What would you do if your service, your sacrifice, your dignity meant nothing because of the color of your skin? What would you do if people looked at you and saw a threat instead of a hero, a problem instead of a person? Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from right now. Drop your city or country in the comments below. We love seeing where our community is tuning in from. And if you believe no veteran should ever face this kind of disrespect, If you believe a Purple Heart should open doors instead of having them slammed in your face, hit that like button and subscribe to Real Stories for content that exposes injustice and celebrates those who refuse to stay silent. Marcus took a slow breath, channeling 15 years of discipline. His first call went to his business partner, James Morrison, a white Hollywood producer who'd been working on their film deal all morning. James picked up on the second ring. Marcus. His voice was warm, energized. How's Belmont? Do they still have that salmon your dad used to? I haven't made it past the front door, Marcus interrupted, his voice calm but cold. Apparently, Belmont Bistro doesn't serve my kind anymore. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. Then, what did you just say? You heard right. I'm standing in the entrance being told I'm inappropriately dressed and don't fit their clientele standards. Marcus locked eyes with Gerald, whose face had gone pale. Meanwhile, white customers in T-shirts and shorts are walking right past me to their tables. James's voice turned to steel. Are you serious? Do they know who you are? I haven't gotten that far yet. Marcus glanced at Carol, who'd taken a small step backward. But Carol here was just about to call the police on a decorated veteran for trying to eat lunch. Don't move. I'm 8 minutes away. James's voice carried that sharp edge Marcus recognized from contract negotiations. And Marcus? Record everything. Document every word. Already doing it, Marcus confirmed. As Marcus lowered the phone, a small crowd had begun to gather. Other diners noticed a commotion at the entrance. The maitre d' blocking a customer, the assistant manager looking increasingly flustered, the man with his phone out recording. Conversations quieted. Heads turned. Cell phones emerged from purses and pockets. An elderly white woman at a nearby table, elegant, white-haired, wearing pearls, stood up slowly, her face flushed with visible anger. This is disgusting, she said loudly, her voice cutting through the murmurs. I've been coming to this restaurant for 35 years, since before you were born, young man. She pointed at Gerald. Mr. Belmont, the real Mr. Belmont, would be ashamed of what you're doing. Turning away a veteran? You should be ashamed of yourselves. Ma'am, please, Carol tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. This is a private matter between the restaurant and... Private? The woman's voice rose. You're humiliating a man who served his country in front of everyone. You're denying him service while seating white customers in worse clothing. She gestured at the man in cargo shorts. There's nothing private about racism. The word landed like a grenade. Several more diners pulled out their phones. Recording now. A younger black couple near the bar stood up, the woman's face tight with barely controlled anger. A white businessman in his 50s shook his head in visible disgust. Gerald looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Carol's professional mask was cracking, panic flickering in her eyes. Ma'am, we need you to sit down, Gerald said, his voice shaking slightly. You're causing a disruption. I'm causing a disruption? The elderly woman's laugh was sharp. Young man, I knew your employer's father. I was here the day he opened this restaurant. She turned to Marcus, her eyes shining. What's your name, son? Marcus Reed, ma'am. Sergeant, 101st Airborne, retired. Sergeant Reed, my late husband fought in Vietnam. He would have been honored to serve alongside you. She turned back to Gerald and Carol, her voice hardening. And he would have knocked some sense into anyone treating you this way. That's when the front door burst open with enough force to make everyone jump. James Morrison stormed in like a force of nature, 6'2", silver-haired, wearing a Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than Gerald's monthly salary. 2 other people followed him, a younger woman with a professional camera and a black man in his 30s carrying what looked like legal documents. Where's Richard Belmont? James demanded, his voice carrying across the entire restaurant. His eyes found Marcus, relief flickering across his face before fury replaced it. Get him down here. Now. Sir, I don't know who you think you are. Carol began, trying to recover her professional composure, but I'm James Morrison. James cut her off, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Executive producer at Pinnacle Productions. He pointed at Marcus. This man is my business partner and one of the primary investors in a $150 million film adaptation we're producing. He gestured at the woman with the camera. We're also currently filming a documentary about discrimination against veterans. He let that sink in for exactly 2 seconds. And you just gave us our opening scene. On camera, with witnesses. So I'll ask one more time. Where is Richard Belmont? Carol's face drained of all color, going from flushed to ghostly white in seconds. Gerald actually stumbled backward, his hand catching the edge of the podium to steady himself. I'll get him, Gerald stammered, practically running toward the back offices, his earlier confidence completely shattered. Marcus watched the shift in dynamics with grim satisfaction mixed with exhaustion. It shouldn't take a white business partner storming in to make people treat him with basic human dignity. It shouldn't require Hollywood credentials and a camera crew to make his humanity visible. But here they were. James walked over to Marcus, his expression a mixture of fury and concern. You okay? Marcus nodded slowly. I've faced worse overseas. But that doesn't make this right. Damn right it doesn't. James turned to the elderly woman who defended Marcus. Thank you for speaking up, ma'am. Someone had to, she replied simply. This isn't what this restaurant was meant to be. The camera operator, Marcus recognized her now as Sarah Chun, their documentary cinematographer, was filming everything. The young black man with the legal documents was Marcus's attorney, Devin Price, who must have been nearby when James called. Less than 2 minutes later, a portly man in an expensive suit emerged from the back, Gerald trailing behind him like a kicked dog. Richard Belmont Jr. had his father's build, but none of his warmth, none of the genuine kindness that used to emanate from the original owner. His eyes were calculating as they swept the restaurant, taking in the crowd of recording phones, the angry faces, the palpable tension. What's going on here? Richard demanded, trying to inject authority into his voice. Gerald said there was some kind of misunderstanding about... Misunderstanding? James stepped forward, and Richard actually flinched. Your staff just refused service to my business partner, called him inappropriately dressed, told him he doesn't fit your clientele image, and threatened to call the police on him. He gestured at the man in cargo shorts, still eating his lunch 2 tables over, all while seating white customers in T-shirts and shorts. So please, enlighten us about this misunderstanding. Richard's eyes finally landed on Marcus, and for a split second, something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe, or calculation, or fear. Marcus had seen Richard at his father's funeral 2 years ago, seated in the front pew accepting condolences. Marcus had been in the back in his dress uniform, paying respect to a man who'd always treated him like family. Richard had looked right past him that day, just like he was trying to look past the truth now. I'm sure this is just confusion about our updated policies, Richard said, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. We recently implemented certain standards to maintain the restaurant's reputation, and perhaps my staff was overly enthusiastic in their interpretation of... Overly enthusiastic? Marcus spoke for the first time directly to Richard, his voice quiet, but carrying absolute authority. I've been eating at your father's restaurant since I was 8 years old. Richard, I sat in that corner booth over there for my 8th birthday. Your father gave me free ice cream and told me stories about World War II. I was seated here in my dress uniform 3 months ago for Veterans Day without any issues. He paused, letting each word land. So tell me, Richard, what changed? New policies or new prejudices? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Richard's face cycled through expressions, defensive anger, calculating concern, and finally something that might have been shame. He glanced at the phone's recording, at James Morrison's barely contained fury, at the crowd of witnesses, at the documentary camera capturing everything. Marcus, I didn't know, Richard stammered. If I had known who you were... There it is, Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. If you'd known who I was... He stepped closer, and Richard instinctively backed up. So you're saying it's okay to discriminate against black customers as long as they're not rich or famous, as long as they can't hurt your business or your reputation. That's not what I meant. Richard protested weakly. Then what did you mean? Marcus demanded. Because your staff made it crystal clear. I don't fit your image. I'm not your clientele. My kind isn't welcome here. He gestured to his face, to his skin. Let's not pretend we don't all know exactly what your kind means. The restaurant had gone completely silent, except for the ambient music playing softly in the background. Some jazz standard that felt wildly inappropriate for the moment. Every eye was on Richard Belmont Jr., waiting for his response. The cameras were still recording. This moment would define him, and everyone in that room knew it. Richard's shoulders sagged. He looked around at the judgmental faces. The phones pointed at him like weapons, the elderly woman glaring at him with open disgust, his father's regular customers seeing exactly what his restaurant had become under his watch. "You're right," Richard finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked down at his expensive shoes, unable to meet Marcus's eyes. "You're absolutely right. My father would be ashamed of me, of what I've let this place become." His hands were shaking slightly. "It's not what he built. It's not what it should be." "No," Marcus agreed, his voice hard. "It's not." Richard seemed to steel himself, then turned to Carol and Gerald. His face had transformed from defensive to coldly furious. "You're both fired. Effective immediately. Pack your things and get out." "Sir," Carol gasped, her professional mask finally shattering completely. "We were just following the guidelines you established for." "The guidelines I established were about maintaining quality, not excluding people based on race." Richard snapped, his voice cracking slightly. "And if you interpret them that way, then I clearly failed in my leadership. But that ends now." He pointed toward the exit. "You're done. Leave before I call the police on you for trespassing." As Carol and Gerald stumbled toward the back, both looking shell-shocked, Richard turned back to Marcus. His eyes were red-rimmed, whether from shame or anger at being caught. Marcus couldn't tell and didn't particularly care. "Marcus, there's no excuse for what happened today." Richard's voice shook. "My father spent 40 years building this restaurant on principles of hospitality and dignity. And in 2 years, I've corrupted it into something he'd despise." He took a shaky breath. "I can't undo what just happened. But I swear on my father's memory, this place will return to his values. Starting today." "Words are easy, Richard," Marcus said quietly. "Let's see if your actions match them." "Fair enough." Richard raised his voice so the entire restaurant could hear. "From this moment forward, Belmont Bistro returns to my father's principles. Every person, regardless of race, religion, background, or how much money they have, is welcome here. No discriminatory dress codes. No membership requirements. Just good food and genuine hospitality." He looked directly at Marcus. "The way it should have been all along. The way my father taught me. Before I forgot." Richard extended his hand. "Your lunch today is on the house, and I'd still be honored if you consider hosting your cast dinner here next month. Not because I deserve it, but because this restaurant needs a chance to prove it can be what my father intended. To prove I can be better than what you saw today." Marcus stared at the extended hand for a long moment. Part of him wanted to walk away, to let this place crumble under the weight of its own bigotry, to never set foot in here again and let the internet do its worst. But another part, the part that remembered Mr. Belmont's genuine kindness, that remembered his father's joy eating here, that believed people could change if the consequences were real enough, made him reach out. Their handshake was brief, formal, empty of warmth. "Actions, Richard," Marcus repeated, his voice carrying a warning. "Not words. Show me this place can actually change." "I will," Richard promised, his voice hoarse. "I swear I will." The crowd began to disperse slowly, the tension breaking like a fever. The elderly woman approached Marcus, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Young man, what they did to you was unforgivable. But the way you stood your ground, the dignity you showed even when they tried to strip it away, that's how real change begins. My husband would have been proud to serve alongside you." "Thank you, ma'am," Marcus said, genuinely touched. "That means more than you know." She squeezed his hand gently. "Don't let this break you. Don't let them make you believe you're anything less than you are." As she walked away, James clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "You handled that with more grace than I would have managed." Marcus shook his head slowly. "I shouldn't have had to handle it at all, James. That's the point. No, James agreed, his voice heavy. You shouldn't have. But you did. And now millions of people will see exactly what happened here. He gestured at Sarah, who was still filming. They'll see you standing up for yourself with dignity and strength. They'll see the discrimination you faced. And they'll see that you didn't need to throw a punch or raise your voice to make your point. The salmon, when Marcus was finally seated at that same window table, was as perfect as he remembered from childhood, seasoned with lemon and dill, cooked to flaky perfection. But it tasted bittersweet now, flavored with the reality of what he'd just endured. This wasn't supposed to be a fight. It was supposed to be lunch. By 6 p.m. that evening, Marcus's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Hashtag Belmont Bigotry was trending #1 nationwide. Screenshots of Gerald's sneer had become instant memes. One tweet with 800,000 likes read, "Imagine being racist to a man who could buy your restaurant with pocket change and still just wanted salmon." The caucasity. The video hit 5 million views in 12 hours. CNN called. Fox News called. Every major veterans organization in the country reached out. Even the mayor's office called. Richard Belmont Jr. was now being investigated for discriminatory business practices, and the city's Civil Rights Commission had opened a formal inquiry. But the comment that stuck with Marcus came from another veteran, someone with the username at SG Johnson _ retired. "Brother, I've been Geralded 100 times in my life, at restaurants, at stores, at my own son's school. Thank you for having cameras this time. Thank you for not letting them sweep it under the rug. This victory is for all of us who've been told we don't belong in places we fought to defend. Semper Fi." Marcus read that comment 3 times, feeling the weight of it settle on his shoulders. He thought about every black veteran who'd faced the same indignity without cameras, without Hollywood credentials, without anyone believing them. This victory was bigger than him. It had to be. For weeks later, Marcus hosted his film's cast dinner at Belmont Bistro. He brought 50 industry professionals, including several high-profile black actors, directors, and writers. He made sure the event was covered by Entertainment Weekly and Variety. He watched Richard Belmont Jr. personally greet every guest with genuine respect, watch him introduce new staff who completed mandatory bias training, watch him unveil a plaque near the entrance, in memory of Marcus Belmont Sr., who believed every person deserves a seat at the table. It wasn't perfect. Years of damage couldn't be undone in 4 weeks. But it was a start. And more importantly, Marcus's story had reached tens of millions of people who now understood that racism wasn't just slurs and burning crosses. It was doors closed, seats denied, humanity questioned. It was being made to feel unwelcome in places you had every right to be. It was having your sacrifice ignored because of the color of your skin. Standing up to injustice is never easy, especially when you're standing alone in that moment of discrimination, when the weight of centuries of racism presses down on your shoulders, when you wonder if speaking up will even matter. But Marcus Reed proved that dignity, documentation, and determination could shine a light into darkness. His military service taught him courage. His success gave him a platform. His character gave him the strength to use both for something bigger than himself. Marcus thought about Hamid, the translator he'd saved in Kandahar, who'd written him a letter after seeing the video. "You saved my life once with your body. Now you save others with your courage. Thank you, my brother, for showing the world what a true soldier looks like, fighting for justice even after the war ends." The fight never really ends, Marcus realized. It just changes battlefields. From Kandahar to a restaurant entrance. From dodging bullets to dodging discrimination. But the mission remained the same. Stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. If you believe a Purple Heart should matter more than a dress code, if you believe service to your country earns you basic human dignity, if you believe racism doesn't disappear just because you succeed, hit that like button and subscribe to Real Stories. Drop a comment sharing your own experience or honoring a veteran you know. Because stories like Marcus's only create change when we refuse to let them be forgotten. Share this video. Tag someone who needs to see it. Let's make sure every Gerald and Carol out there knows the world is watching. Thank you for watching, and remember, standing up for what's right isn't optional. It's the price of a free society. It's what our veterans fought for, and it's what we owe each other every single day.